Hello and welcome to The Pledge. Well, worrying news emerged this week that Britain could run out of beer in days because the European supply of carbon dioxide is at an all-time low. It comes as pubs and supermarkets are facing huge demand due to warmer weather and, of course, the World Cup. Now, what we really need is a very nice, very benevolent, very generous owner of a beer company who could provide us all with copious bottles to keep us all hydrated on those hot summer afternoons. If only we knew someone who could help. OK, coming up, Nick says there are no easy answers on migration. Greg talks about football. Karen says there should be no fight over defence spending. And Afua gets personal. But first, it's me. This week, Home Secretary Sajid Javid announced a government review into the use of medical cannabis, but insisted that recreational use of the drug will remain illegal. And that's right, isn't it? With so many studies telling us prolonged cannabis use, especially in the young, can lead to schizophrenia, psychosis, addiction and some cancers. And in a major intervention, the boss of NHS England, Simon Stevens, warned legislation would lead to children believing that the drug is safe, when it isn't. But former Tory leader William Hague disagrees. He wants the government to be bold and legalise because he says we have comprehensively and irreversibly lost the war. And I say, what war? There's never been a war in this country on drugs. But there is the lie, peddled by legislation zealots, that decriminalising drugs will drive out the criminal gangs, when it won't. And I'm sorry, but legalising a drug linked to mental illness, violence, organised crime and road deaths is irresponsible and stupid. Just because something is regulated, it doesn't mean it's safe. And that's surely the only question with drugs. Are they safe? And if the answer is no, there can be no grounds for legalising them.
I've got quite a lot of time for William Hague. I think he's one of the more impressive politicians of our generation. And I think it's worth just looking at what he said. He said, as far as marijuana or cannabis is concerned, any war has been comprehensively and irreversibly lost. The idea that the drug can be taken off the streets and out of people's lives by the state is nothing short of deluded. Everyone sitting in a Whitehall conference room needs to recognise that, out there, cannabis is ubiquitous. And issuing orders to the police to defeat its use is about as up-to-date and relevant as asking the army to recover the empire. This battle is effectively over. Now, we've known that for quite a lot of years now. We've known that actually, and what worries me about where we've reached in cannabis is when a large enough part of the population completely ignores the law, you actually devalue the law and you devalue the process of law. And that's what I think is where we've got to on cannabis. I remember being at university and a long time ago and mates who were smoking cannabis, someone knocked on the door, it was a policeman, they got caught there, and it affected their whole lives. They got taken to court and the rest of it. Now, that doesn't happen anymore. Individual users of cannabis do not get taken to court, by and large. And it's either could be legalised or it has been legalised just by process.
The police, it makes me laugh when people say we've lost a war on drugs. We've never ever fought a war on drugs because the police actually said there was a piece in the Times last year where they said that warnings and tickets for possession, fixed penalty notices have halved in the last 4 years. They just don't do it anymore. But that's not. But Greg, it's not right that they don't do it. When kids of 14, 15 are smoking cannabis, and we know that cannabis can cause schizophrenia, psychosis, anxiety, depression, all of these things. I keep on hearing the argument about, well, tobacco and alcohol are legal drugs. Yes, they are. And look at the damage that they cause to society. Every year, the NHS, 3.5 billion on alcohol-related illnesses, 3.6 on tobacco.
If enough people ignore the law is what we know is happening.
Well, do we know what's happening?
Oh, yes.
How do we know? That is simply not true, because 90% of the population don't take drugs, 10% are regular users. So how are people ignoring the law?
But cannabis is something like 6%.
Actually, yes. I've got the figures on cannabis.
Well, I have the figures.
6.6% of adults use cannabis. We've got it up here. 6.6% of adults use cannabis. 16 to 24-year-olds, it's 16.4%. So I think, not huge, but a significant number. But Carole, just, you know, when I was listening to you, what you said made a lot of sense to me until I kind of had to then match it with what you said at the beginning of the show, which is that we all find alcohol very socially acceptable. You know, Karen's got a beer business, which is very popular. We all enjoy drinking in summer.
Responsible drinking.
That's why we're running out of CO2. But it's a widely accepted medical and political fact that alcohol is more harmful than cannabis.
That's not true. That's simply not true. Simply not true. Simply not true. The fact is that people who smoke 3 cannabis joints a day are in more danger than people who smoke 20 cigarettes a day. And that's been put out by the NHS.
There's no question about it. And I've seen this, sadly, from my own family experience. If somebody smokes cannabis regularly on a daily basis, it affects them entirely. It's got huge psychotic, mental effects.
Alcohol regularly on a daily basis.
No, this is completely different. This is completely different.
I'm talking about
on the other hand, on the other hand, I think
in the Lancet that are accepted by the medical establishment.
There are medical. I think we're not comparing
drug.
alcohol and cannabis here. The issue over here was triggered by this child who couldn't get the medical cannabis that he required, and I think on that score, we should definitely look to legalising medical cannabis. In the same way, look at opioids. Look at opioids. They're far more addicted. I mean, if anyone's had an operation and you've been on morphine, you need it for the pain, but it's addictive. Yeah. And yet, it's legalised. And it's allowed. And I think we should definitely allow for cannabis, for medical reasons, to be legalised.
What's brought this debate about is, of course, these 2 children you talk of, Alfie Dingley and Billy Caldwell. And here's Charlotte Caldwell, mother of Billy.
I never want to see or hear of another mother in our country having to endure or watch their child endure what Billy has endured this week. Medicine confiscated based on bureaucracy, old, outdated policies and laws. These children have to be medically assessed. It's medical advice. That's what this has to be based on.
Now, that mum was on my show, and within 24 hours of the boy not having the drug, he was having seizures or fitting, whatever you want, at the rate of about 100 per day. Yeah. And the drug helps. I don't know necessarily we want to go down the argument here of legalisation versus decriminalisation. Take up your point, Karen, and I think we're on the same page. We accept drugs made of opium because they know they can help, although there's an issue going on at Gosport Hospital, which is a story just breaking as we speak. So we know that. So if we can take drugs from opium, why, for the love of all's holy, can we not take cannabis for oil at the strength that they use in Canada? It seems to be an absolute
Can Javid just quickly, because he is the Home Secretary who has been talking about this, and let's hear exactly what he says.
The position that we find ourselves in currently is not satisfactory. It's not satisfactory for the parents, it's not satisfactory for the doctors, and it's not satisfactory for me. I've now come to the conclusion that it is time to review the scheduling of cannabis. This step is in no way a first step to the legalisation of cannabis for recreational use. This government has absolutely no plans to legalise cannabis, and the penalties for unauthorised supply and possession will remain unchanged.
Obviously, the government is trying to very clearly distinguish what you're talking about for medical use and the legalisation of cannabis for recreational use. I am not somebody who thinks that legalising cannabis will solve all of our problems with drugs. There's, the evidence from other states and countries that have legalised it is that it doesn't necessarily solve problems, and sometimes it creates more. However, I do think we need to scrutinise our cultural attitudes towards cannabis, because for me, there's a huge discrepancy between our attitudes towards socially acceptable drugs, which are more harmful, including alcohol and tobacco. I drink alcohol. Most of the people I know drink alcohol. There's no taboo around it, but it has no medicinal benefits, and it is known to be harmful. And I can't understand why we have this block.
Actually, by the way, no medicinal. There are lots of research that shows that beer in moderation is actually good for the health.
And one glass of
good look, Karen.
And red wine.
I think it's a capful of red wine.
One more point. I just want to make one. We mustn't miss this. Another argument that is made to legalise recreational cannabis is that it'll bring in. There's one study that it brings in £1 billion net more to the economy. I don't think we should do it. No, that argument doesn't work. I think medicinal, yes,
irresponsible of a government
cannot be legalised.
How greedy and irresponsible of a government to legalise something and rake in tax billions, knowing that it causes harm. Before, I just want to make this point about medicinal cannabis. There's a guy called Dr. David Robert Grants. He is a researcher, he's a physicist. He says that the reality is most health claims made about cannabis are wrong. and they're devoid of evidence. They risk endangering the lives of the very people they're supposed to help. Yes, there is definite evidence that it helps people with epilepsy. There is a small amount of evidence that it helps chronic pain, and an even smaller amount that it helps people taking cancer drugs. It stops the nausea, but the caveat is it can also create nausea. But, you know, and I'm looking at Charlotte Caldwell here, and this a story emerges this week. Thank God her boy has got it, because I think on a case-by-case basis is good. But let's not forget Charlotte Caldwell is the sole director of a distribution company that makes cannabis oil.
It doesn't matter if it helps her son. No wonder she's got a passion for it.
There's a vested interest, and I would have actually more time for people who were campaigning for the legalisation of medical cannabis if many of them weren't wrapped up in campaigns to legalise it for recreational
By the way, the
use.
country was outraged when that was confiscated by the Home
Yes,
Office.
I get that.
The whole country was
But
outraged.
it's got to be in a case-by-case
I have a
basis.
mate who, at the moment, got cancer pretty seriously, who takes cannabis oil every day. And he says it's helping. Now, whether it's helping or not, it seems to me it doesn't matter. If he's taking it and he thinks it's helping, then it's got some chance of helping.
But